Welcome. I'm Amy Taylor-Kabbaz, and this is the Happy Mama Movement podcast, a podcast dedicated to bringing the groundbreaking insights of matrescence to the world through interviews with leading experts, mamas, and those who are dedicated to making sure mothers are supported differently. These are our stories and your stories. Thank you for being a part of the matrescence movement. Rhiannon, thank you for joining the Happy Mama Movement podcast and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love speaking to fellow journalist brains like yourself because I think when we experience big and even sometimes small things in life, we kind of have to go on this journey of trying to understand it more and then share it with the world and look at what needs to change. And when I read your work and everything that you've been doing around this, I'm like, oh, there's a fellow seeker. So, because so much of what we think we need to do to prepare for motherhood is really different when we actually land into it. So, I thought let's start with that. When you were deciding to whether you should have a baby now or not, what was that process like for you and what were you thinking this would be?
It was quite a difficult process for me, I'd say, because I very much wanted to have a baby. I'd had what they call baby fever, I suppose, where I felt a very visceral, physical, dare I say biological desire to have a child. Um, but it was complicated for me. It was complicated because I'd been a carer for my brother growing up. My brother has autism, or rather, he's autistic, as we say now. And I was scared about becoming a carer again in any capacity, which I think, is something that's daunting anyway. But I think it's particularly complicated by the fact that, I knew how hard it is physically and emotionally to look after somebody else who's more vulnerable. And my mother always says, once you have a child, you are forever vulnerable.
Mm.
And I was frightened of that vulnerability
Yeah.
and what it would mean for me. It was also complicated by the fact that I had a history of post-traumatic stress disorder, and the impact on my mental health was something that I considered very seriously. So I would say it was this kind of tug of war between what felt to me like a very primal desire and my kind of rational mind going, maybe this isn't the best idea for you. So
Mm.
I very much desired motherhood, but I was frightened of it, I'd say.
And it's so incredibly honest that when you said once you become a mother, you're vulnerable forever, that does feel a bit terrifying. Especially if you're a woman, a person in this world who has really worked hard at, building resilience or strength or making sure that you're okay in this world. And then when you welcome a child into this world, that is an unknown forever now. Like that's a scary concept.
It's really scary, and I don't think people talk about it enough,
Mm-mm.
Like, I hate it when people say, "Oh, if you're going to have a baby, you have to be 100% sure
Mm.
that you want to have a baby before you have a baby." I've never been 100% sure about anything in my life.
Mm.
If you're an intelligent human being, you question things. You turn
Yes.
them over in your mind, you analyze them, you weigh up the decision. I think it's a big decision. It's not as weighted for some people
Mm.
as it was for me. But
Mm.
a lot of people do take it very seriously, especially now. I can remember my literary agent saying to me, "Oh, what for us, it was just what you did. You didn't
Yeah.
think about it so much. But now I think we have so many pressures, our generation, particularly, in terms of the climate catastrophe, in terms of in the UK, we have a housing crisis. I think in Australia, you have a housing crisis too.
Mhm. Mhm.
The cost of living,
Cost of
the
childcare.
motherhood penalty that you pay in your career. Like there's so many things to kind of weigh up. In a way, like you can't weigh them up too much, otherwise you'd never do it. But
Exactly.
I think it's unrealistic to say you have to be 100% sure. you
Mm.
know?
And I would argue that even if you were 100% sure, when it actually lands, that 100% can change pretty quickly. Like
Oh,
we can.
absolutely.
So, how did you process that and come to the yes? Or did you just decide that it's never going to be 100% yes or no? And so I'm going to try anyway. What was that process like?
Well, it involved a lot of talking to my husband. It involved a lot of writing. My previous book, The Year of the
Mm.
Cat, is about the year of the pandemic where I was weighing up this question and I adopted this kitten. And I was kind of using the kitten as a way of like working through my own neurosis about motherhood and caring and all this stuff. And I desperately just wanted a small thing to look after, you know. And I was quite interested in how women without children have been stigmatized as cat ladies for so long, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so it was very much a process of kind of questioning for me. And then I think coming out of the pandemic and things feeling more hopeful, and just me feeling more hopeful and him feeling more hopeful. And then it happened very, very quickly for us.
Mm.
My mum said the turnaround from me deciding to have a kid and him being there was incredibly quick when you consider the fact that he came early as well. It was
Yes.
kinda like one minute I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna have a baby," and then the next minute it felt like I had this baby.
Mm.
So, even though I'd done all this work in kind of processing, as you know, it's always a shock.
It's always.
No matter how much revision you do or how much studying you do, how much reading you do, how much talking you do, it's still a profound shock when it happens, I think.
And I know in your latest book, you looked a lot at what, previous writers and people have said around motherhood and then what this generation experiences, both similar and very different. And again, I feel like in the past, there probably wasn't as much preparation and thinking it all through because it was just assumed that if you were born female by a certain age, you would have a baby, otherwise, you turn into a cat lady. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how the impact of all of our preparation that our generation does, how that
Mhm.
impacts the actual experience when it starts on the other side. Sometimes I think we over prepare thinking it's going to keep us safe from all those vulnerabilities that are inevitably going to arrive.
Yeah. I just think, like, I was so interested in the conflict between, you know, what you read about motherhood and what the experience is like. Because so much of what is written about motherhood is written in retrospect, understandably, because when you are immediately postpartum, unless you're insane like me, you're not in a position where you're writing about it because you're so consumed by what you're doing and you are having no sleep and you are bleeding and you are leaking and you have this thing that needs you all the time, you know? So I wanted as a writer to kind of bridge that gap between the writing and the lived experience by kind of
Mm,
writing through it.
mm,
And what I kind of realized is there is no way to prepare yourself. You know, Rachel Cusk is brilliant on this because she talks about how people must have said things to her, but it's almost like her brain just filtered them out because it wasn't useful information to her until she was doing it.
mm,
You know, when people say, "Oh, nobody told me. No one
mhm,
told me it would be like this." And there are plenty of things that I think nobody tells. I
mm,
do think we try and protect women from the reality of labor so as not to scare them. I
mhm,
think we do try and protect, you know, there is definitely a kind of move towards trying to encourage women to breastfeed by not telling them how difficult it can be, you know, for fear of putting them off. You know, we're so impressionable, us women, you know.
and we're so
Um,
sensitive around all of this, we have
yeah,
to be gentle with them.
exactly. And I think it's about like, it's about that, you know, the preparation. It's just none of it comes close to the lived reality of it. None of it.
Mm, mm.
You know, you could read every book in the world and still not be prepared for the profound physical and visceral shock of motherhood, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. That's exactly what my experience has been. I do think we talk about it in my work, like whisper the words. It's like, just plant these little seeds of, it might feel like this when you get there. And if it does feel like that, it's totally okay. And they may not be taking it fully in, but hopefully something has gone in somewhere in their brain. So when
Mhm.
they start to experience it on the other side, they're like, oh, was that thing that Amy was talking about? So I feel like there's slight preparation we could do. But I love that
Mm,
you had this beautiful intention of writing through this experience, and then your baby arrived 5 weeks early. So
mhm.
and it started way before you were ready and the timing. What was that like to feel like were you you had a clear plan and a timing and an understanding of what this would be like? Because I've been interviewing and talking to mothers for a decade, and I think those moments of I had a plan and it went nothing like it is often the moment of cracking open, the moment of realization that we can never really understand or plan what our life is
Yeah.
going to be like as a mother. So that was sort of your first entry point to the unpredictability of it.
Yeah, I mean, well, basically my waters went. I had preterm premature rupture of membranes, and it was like, my mother-in-law, who has 9 children, one of which is my husband, obviously, had gently suggested about a week before that I might consider packing a hospital bag, a suggestion that we ignored. And then, whoosh. And our NCT, do you have NCT in Oz? It's
No.
basically the National Childbirth Trust. It's like these classes, it's like these prenatal classes that
Oh,
people go
yes.
to. And um, they're very geared towards natural birth. I hadn't realized at the time, but they are. But anyway, our course leader had said, "Oh, it's not like the movies. Your waters aren't going to break, and it's not going to be a big rush to the hospital or anything like that. That's not usually what happens, especially not with a first baby." And obviously, that is what happened to me. Um, and we were like running around the house throwing things into a bag, and it was all kind of, it's too early, but you know I think until I got to the hospital, it was quite scary, and then they were very much like, "Your baby's gonna be fine,
Mm.
but you're not leaving here without a baby." And I can remember I had like a therapy session booked for that afternoon that I was doing a bit of, like, pre-baby counseling. There's an amazing psychology service at our local hospital which specializes in women who are afraid of childbirth for whatever reason.
Wow.
And I thought it might be worth me doing it just because of the PTSD. I was worried that childbirth would trigger my PTSD basically.
Mhm.
Um, and I can remember I sent her an email saying, I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it or not because I think I might be in labor." You're kind of like, "Maybe I'll make it still, I don't know," you
Yes.
know? So I just think it hadn't hit home with me at all what was happening,
Mm.
and I don't think it did for a few months actually.
Mm.
And of course, as anyone who's had a preterm baby probably knows, there's an element of guilt there as well. You think, what did I do? Was it because I ate a curry? Was it because I went for a walk? Was it because I had sex? Was it because I did this? Was it because I did that? You know, um, which you find out later, most cases, it's an infection and they never really know the cause, just happens to some women. Some women's clocks are just kind of off as well.
Yes. Yep.
Um, but there's a whole process before you get to that point where you're going, oh, it's my fault that it went this way
Mm.
and that the birth went this way as well.
Mm.
You know, I mean, because I had a very complicated birth. Afterwards, the obstetrician came to see me and she said, "I just want you to know that it was never going to go any other way." And I was
Mm.
really grateful for that. I don't think women get that. A lot of women get that, you know? But there are all these mixed feelings when you have a dramatic birth, I think, because
Yeah,
you're
very
taught
much so.
to desire a certain birth. I mean, our NCT tutor had said the ideal birth is at home without pain relief, um, which, I don't agree with now, but that was her stance,
Yeah. I don't know if everybody who's had a natural birth, would agree with that. But that's the thing. There is this difference between the story we're told, the picture we're told, the, you know, divine, feminine, natural way that this is meant to occur because this is what we are here to do, and then the absolute reality that we experience. Would it be okay for me to ask you about how you navigated your mental health in those first sort of months afterwards? Because you were so aware of something might be triggered, but also those feelings of being a carer again, obviously only if you're okay to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm really happy to be open about that because I think it's important
Mm,
for other women that we talk about it. And,
mm,
I didn't write about it at the time, mainly because there was just so much else to write about. But I was under the perinatal mental health team. Um, I was really lucky in that I didn't really meet the threshold for referral, but I had a very good consultant who kind of pushed for me to at least have some contact with them.
mhm,
So, I wasn't like fully in the service in that I wasn't having intensive therapy and support like that. But because of my mental health history and because of concerns about how PTSD could develop into postnatal depression or anxiety,
mm,
I did have occasional visits from the mental health nurse to kind of check in, and that was really helpful. And I just think that's something that all women should have. They should have
right.
preventative mental health care as
Mm,
opposed to, I mean, I have a friend who's pregnant at the moment who isn't meeting the threshold for referral. And, they basically said to her, oh, we wait until women fall apart and then we step in, which is just, you know,
There's this huge gap in the middle, isn't there?
yeah.
That, we'll step in when you're in crisis, or way over here, you're doing great. This is everything that you thought it would be. And you've got a great support network around you. You've got everything
Mhm.
you need. And then in the middle is this huge population that, uh, maybe bordering on needing more, but they don't meet that threshold.
Exactly. And I think without Pendra, the mental health nurse, and without I had a lot of at-home midwife visits. I had a very engaged health visitor. Prematurity means that a lot of stuff kicks in as well. You get a bit more support, obviously.
Mm,
So once we were out of the NICU, which he was only in for a couple of days, and I was in hospital for a week afterwards with him. But
mhm,
once you're out of hospital, I was really, really lucky to benefit from quite a lot of intensive support, and I think that's what saved me really, because
mm,
breastfeeding was really, really difficult, and the pressure I was under to do that had the potential to put me in quite a dark place, and it did start putting me in quite a dark place.
mm,
Um, but because I received good support, I came out the other side without a diagnosis of any kind.
mm,
And I think it just shows, that's what women need. They need that peer support. And, also I think parental leave is relevant too. My husband was off for 4 months, nearly 5 months
yeah,
with
that
me.
makes a big difference.
And that made a huge difference. Had I been on my own
Mm,
suddenly with a newborn, a premature newborn who wasn't feeding properly, after, if my husband had taken the 2 week statutory paternity leave, I think it would have been a very different picture.
mm,
My friends whose husbands went back to work were in shock, just complete shock.
yeah.
You've had 2 weeks to kind of adapt, it's not long enough.
It's not long enough. And like you
No.
said, you're still bleeding and healing and, like you don't even know what's happened to your body yet, let alone how to look after another body. Also, I'm sure you feel the same. I always think about, we are aware of what our mental health history is. We are aware of the services that we can access, that there are things that we should be aware, be prepared for. Like we know we're educated in ourselves a lot about what we might need or when it starts happening, what to access.
Mm,
So many women out there either don't have the knowledge, the understanding of the resources, or the people around them that are encouraging them to reach for it. And so that's what makes me so frustrated with the system is that for those who can advocate for themselves and reach out to a preparing for birth for PTSD mothers
mhm,
class, then
mhm.
yay, we can catch them hopefully before they fall into that place. But for so many, that's not even going to be on their radar.
Yeah,
And
I
yeah.
can remember reading there's a writer here called Chloe Hamilton, and she wrote a brilliant piece about intrusive thoughts.
Mhm.
'Cause she had I think many women experience intrusive thoughts after giving birth. I know I did.
Me
They
too.
didn't get out of hand, although with the breastfeeding problems and the pressure, they had the potential to. But they do go away, and one of the things I try and tell women who are, again, it's like you plant these delicate little seeds, don't you?
Mhm.
And I do try and say, well, usually they pass. If they don't pass these thoughts, that's when you seek help. But she said, just a sign on the inside of a toilet door in the hospitals, listing some of these intrusive thoughts and saying, if you're having these a lot, here are some services that can support
Yes.
you. Because, before you have a baby, you don't know what's normal and what's normal. I mean, I didn't know, for example, about phantom crying, which is when
Oh,
you,
yes.
you
I'd
know,
forgotten about
you
that.
see your baby cry when they're not crying. You
Or they're
know,
not even there. They've
they're
gone
not
to
even
daycare or
there.
something, and you come home,
Yeah,
you're like, "Is
it's
it?"
insane, so
I'd forgotten
I
about
do
that.
think, a lot I think we do need help passing what's normal and
Mm.
what's something that might need a little bit of support,
Mm.
because we're all learning. It's all
And
new
it's
for us.
exciting now that the neuroscience, the study of how a woman's brain changes in that pregnancy and postpartum, it's only like finally started to be done. I think we have an incredible neuroscientist here in Australia that's like world leading. And I think she said 2017 was the
Mm,
first time a dedicated study on this has begun.
yeah.
I feel like, I hope, Rhiannon, that we're getting to the point where all of these things that mothers have been quiet about or felt like, oh my God, there must be something wrong with me and I don't want to say anything to anybody, the more we can scientifically show this is because your immune system has crashed after birth and the amygdala has done this, and then you're, the more we're going to make this normalized that this says all the things that you may experience. And
Mm.
it doesn't mean that there is a reason you shouldn't be a mum or there's anything wrong with you. This is the normal experience. If it's more than that, come and get some help. But I feel like we're getting closer to normalizing the radical change we go through. Do you
Yeah, and
feel
I
like
think
that?
absolutely, and I think even having a word for it, matrescence,
Mm.
is profoundly radicalizing for all of us
Mhm.
because for so long this was an experience that hardly had any words given to it,
Mm.
and let alone, scientific thought underpinning it. And, I suppose it so much of motherhood, I felt like I was being treated like an idiot,
Yes.
Like this experience was something that was only a bodily experience and not an intellectual experience. When actually we know that motherhood is a profoundly intellectual experience, and the things that your brain is doing and is capable of in that time period is amazing.
Mhm.
And the things that we juggle as women as well. Um, and I hated that. I hated this idea that this was a purely kind of physical, unthinking experience. And I think what we're seeing now is women saying, hold on, no,
Mm.
we are going to talk about this and we are going to unpick this and we are going to rationalize this. So much of what we say about motherhood is silenced because every woman's done it.
Yeah.
You think you're the first woman in the history of the world to have a baby. There
Mhm.
are all of these kind of silencing tactics that we're
Mm.
subjected to. And I
Mhm.
think we're reaching a critical mass now where women are saying, hold on, no, we're going to talk about this.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. So much of what you write, both within your experience of becoming a mother and all of your writing, is like the personal is political, and I
Mhm.
love that saying. And so I wanted to get you to share with the listeners a little about how this personal experience has influenced what you see, especially in the UK,
Mm.
and what you want to see change in that.
Well, I mean, I have to start by saying that, the situation in Gaza has, for me, with it coinciding with me having a child,
Mm.
you know, the idea, I think, of any child being in pain or any child being hungry or any child being subjected to violence was difficult for me to contemplate before. but now it feels kind of almost viscerally unbearable. So motherhood in that respect has been a kind of gift and a curse in that the awareness of how connected we all are and how lucky we are by accident of birth to be going to bed with food in our stomachs and warm beds, you know, has been profound for me. So it's been
Yeah.
a profoundly politically radicalizing experience for me, motherhood,
Oh,
in many, many ways.
yes.
Um, but in terms of our own kind of social system in the UK, I would say it's about connection, isn't it? It's about community and it's about networks. And I think what we are lacking so much in the Western world is an environment in which to raise children that is cooperative and supportive and that links us to other human beings. I think we've become kind of detached from the networks that as humans we have evolved to need and want. You know, our grandmothers and our great grandmothers would have raised children with family living in streets nearby,
Yep.
friends doing it at the same time,
Mhm.
just like a huge support network around them. And we've kind of been robbed of that, yet we're being told to see it as normal. And it's not normal, and I think one of the things that hits you when you have a baby is how insufficient the nuclear family is as a model for raising children, which is what my mum said to me. I know I keep quoting my mum, but my
Love it.
mum was around a lot when my son was a newborn. Even though she doesn't live in London, she travelled to come and she spent many nights on our sofa. Um, you know, if you don't have a spare bedroom, get a sofa bed for your mum. Don't let her sleep on the sofa. That's
Tip number
one of the
1.
things that I've learned. But, you know, she was saying, "Oh, the nuclear family's rubbish for raising kids." You know,
Yep.
there's a reason a lot of new mums kind of start dreaming of living in communes.
Mhm.
And I think that's because that's how we're supposed to be. And I think as parents, we should be demanding more from our governments in terms of the support that we're given, which in the UK is pathetic, really.
Yeah. It's also why so many mums, dream, contemplate, and then sometimes follow through, leaving their big careers and staying at home and creating something on the side just so they can be, like there's this, it's policy, it's our health network and all of that support. And then also when they go back to work, there's this pull of needing to be like they used to be at work. That
Yeah.
it's very long hours, demanding, depending on what you do. That's so invisible in our corporate workplace culture as well. That
Mhm.
the reality of trying to manage this kid at home or these children with daycare and, winter bugs and all of that, that is so invisible as well. It is ridiculous what we ask of
Mhm.
one or two parents to raise the next generation with nothing else around to support it.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I don't think dads can have it all either. And
No,
I
I
think
totally agree.
what's starting to happen now is that, you know, men are waking up to the fact that, or many men are waking up to the fact that they actually do want to be there for their children.
Mhm.
And the fact that there's not a supportive system in place and they're coming up against their workplace culture, you
Mhm.
know, where it's not expected that they should play active roles in their own children's lives.
Yes.
And, you know, I do think, sadly, when men ask for things in the workplace, it tends to happen a lot faster. So having those guys on our side
Is gonna help.
is going to help. It's only going to be a positive thing.
That's it. I
Um,
often think, you know, we need like a revolution. I know your work is the Republic of Parenthood. I've always said like we need a revolution in this way. And it's like the revolution starts with the people who are most affected by it. And then you
yeah,
get momentum when you get the next sort of layer of people buying in as well. And that's
yeah,
what's happening with, thank goodness, and wonderfully, the men, the other parents, the non-birthing parents are like, yeah, actually, it doesn't work for me either. And so here's this momentum growing where everyone's starting to say, this is not the way we should be doing it. And hopefully that's when we get the change that we want to see.
exactly. Like we've got quite a big dad-led campaign for parental leave in the UK now for better paternity leave. Because as we know, if you have rubbish paternity leave, what happens is women are left alone and unsupported in their homes with newborn babies, which is like
Mhm.
a real mental health risk. And they also become like an expert in the baby, right? I have a colleague who's quite radical about this. He's like, every man should have to look after their baby alone
Mm.
at the beginning for a bit, at least, because otherwise, if you're not the primary caregiver, you kind of disappear into that role where you're kind of like going, "Where are the muslins?
Yeah.
How much milk should I give them?" And that just adds to the kind of mental and emotional load on the mother who
Yes.
becomes the expert in the baby.
And usually resentful for it. Also,
Resentful.
again, here's where the science and the research is catching up, because it used to be assumed that a mother knew how to do this because she has the female genetic parts to know how to raise a baby. We now know that if the non-birthing parent has an similar amount of time at home at the beginning, their brain changes just as much as the birthing mother.
Mhm.
So, and then they learn the skills how to parent. So the longer that the dad, the non-birthing parent, can be at home, the more they adapt to being in this parent role as well. So I think it's an exciting time. Do you feel like we're heading in the right direction?
Yeah, I do actually feel quite positive, like, looking around in the NICU at the dads with their shirts off, doing their skin to
Mm.
skin, because the fact that medical staff are saying, skin to skin's really important for dads too.
Mm.
You do kind of think, yeah, this is different, this is new,
Yep.
and things are changing, albeit far too slowly. Um, and obviously there are still a lot of women who have a baby and then patriarchy kind of hits them square in the face.
Mhm.
They thought they'd be able to do it equally, and actually they find that they're battling their husbands and weaponized incompetence and all that stuff that we know about. I do think there are still a lot of men who really need to step up, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yes.
But it does feel like we're heading in the right direction. I feel hopeful. I think having a child is a great act of hope.
Oh, what a beautiful thing to say to finish. I agree. It was fantastic to speak to you, Rhiannon. Thank you so much. I'll put the details of all your books and your work and your articles in the link for the show notes. But thank you for documenting this experience and sharing it with everybody. Yeah, I really appreciated it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a good chat.